things first. You already win. You already him. You don't gotta pretend. Fuck them. You already king. You stay real. You confident in your skin. It's all now. Sit in the power that you already in. This the story of a master from a true Bedouin, far away from home than few ever been. First round pick, league of the smooth gentleman. The game rigged like 50 said it's a cruel sentiment. I'm from the era when lyrics and bars is over everything. 5-star veteran. You couldn't walk in my fucking shoes or carry them. Excuse my borderline is very thin. Been married to the game like ever since maybe 2010. I realized most of y'all not serious. Point blank period. I flex and twist necks like cherry stems. Thought he was buried, but there he is, a new narrative.
Yo.
I keep winning.
What's up, y'all?
I keep winning.
Hey. What's going on, y'all? It is November 6th, 2024. It is post-election day, the day after. Oh, my goodness. And as you probably know, we're in a new regime with the return of the ex-president. Number 45 is also 47. Unfortunately, for quite many of us. Many people are really in dismay right now, really upset and struggling to understand and questioning our political systems and questioning our electorate. I think we have a lot of questions that should be asked and a lot of questions that need to be answered about the electorate, about our political classes, about our media classes, about our discourse, about it all. Applause for that. Let's do it. Let's get into that. I don't think it's a time to be like beside oneself. I see some people really being upset and talking about the end of the world and things, and people back to that same rhetoric. I see a lot of people used to, I'm going to go move to a different country now and everything's lost. I think that that's a bit much. I think that you're here and you're free to do whatever you wish. But this country is the same country today that it was yesterday, frankly. And we still are with the current president, the lame duck, President Biden, in fact, for several more months before the transfer of power. And even then, when that transfer of power occurs, I think that the country is still the same country it was before and 4 years ago. And it's different, and the global experience is different, but it's also the same. And this is one of the problems, I think, with our entire discourse. We're going to get, when I do my analysis, first off, that I stayed away from this for a long time. I dropped some of my opinions here and there. It's pretty clear. Nobody could mistake me for either a Trump supporter nor a Harris supporter. I've long decided and realized that the two-party system are two sides of the same butt cheeks, and that they play against each other, and they play and vie for our attention and for our support in a ton of ways that are shitty and don't help us see. When people put their hopes and believes in a political party and hope that we're going to see some sort of manifestation of a set of policies, whatever. I think we're so far past that. We're talking about candidates that, Trump has ridden entirely on a wave of just like celebrity and illogical attachment and anger and some like reckoning back to some perfect, like awesome time when the country was great. And sadly, Kamala Harris, President or Vice President Harris, gave us something similar. It was really something not similar in the sense of, obviously, she wasn't riding the same narrative of like America was great in the previous era. She had a different audience she was courting. But at the same time, it wasn't substantive. It was a back and forth of vibes and energy and feel good. We are going back. We're not going back. It was the opposite, sort of like we're never going back and make America great again and all this stuff. And I just don't understand how anybody was showing up at these rallies, whether it's the ridiculous, some people compare it to a Klan rally, that absurd rally that happened in Madison Square Garden for Trump, or the rallies that took place all around the country for Harris. The excitement is odd to me and has always been odd to me.
Oh, yeah.
And now that we're in a post-election period and it's all settled a bit, we're in this period now where everybody wants to figure out who to blame for this and that, especially if you're on the left or liberal and then further left. There's a lot of questions about who to blame. And there's always somebody to blame. And people are going to have their different analysis. And they're going to be able to look at numbers and come up with stories. And they're going to look at this and that and da. And from what I'm seeing, state to state, if it were the case, like even, I'll put it straight away. I voted for Jill Stein, by the way. I voted for the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, Butch Ware. They made the most sense to me. They were anti-war candidates for the Green Party, which is and continues to be in a long process of making themselves viable against all of the limitations, the intentional limitations put forth by the two mainstream parties to make sure that it's a game of two. It's a race of two for themselves, so that even when they lose, that they're still in a decent position. Sometimes it's fun to be in that. I've been in a Congress staffer. To be in the minority simply means there are a few more resources. There are fewer employees that you can bring on, and yes, it's ostensibly less powerful. But to also be in a position of like having to like finger wag and to look up at the bad guy who's in power, who's failing to use their power correctly, that's a great position. The Republicans use that wonderfully and fluidly whenever it's available to them. They did it all of the last cycle, the last election when Biden was in office. Look at the numbers, blah blah blah. It's story crafting. This goes back to so much of what we've been talking about on this show. It's stories. There's stories being constructed. There's a reality, which is a complex thing, and then there's stories. And so some people are looking at the stats and blaming black men. How can black men not have been excited about the Kamala Harris campaign? Why didn't they do that? Some people are looking, and apparently Trump gained some traction with Latinos, and so they're confused about that. How could that be? Some people are blaming Palestine advocates and people who were pushing Kamala to be anti-genocide. Poll after poll after poll, and I don't give two shits about polls, but the people who do care see these polls, and they see that her viability as a candidate, and I'll add to that her strength as a historical figure. Really, she just happened to be the timing of it. It positioned her where her strength as a historical figure and a candidate hinged in part on her capacity to do the simple and honest and true thing and to stand against genocide, as we know that we're all supposed to stand against genocide. She couldn't do it. So she positioned herself in a way that supported Israel unwaveringly, just like the President Biden did. And I think that was part of her thing, but that's not the full story. Some people are telling a story that, this is just a racist country. What can we do? It's just a racist country. Some people are saying it's just a sexist country. Of course, they still haven't, we at least got Obama. We can't ever get a female candidate. And that's really what it is. Everybody, just rejected her on the basis of her femaleness. I've seen some debates on X, and the question is, how genuine are these conversations? I'm not fully sure. While some people are saying, of course, she should have been a genuine anti-genocide candidate, I'm also seeing guys referring to exit poll data and saying that, oh, well, the exit polls suggest that Kamala, the problem was that she was actually too left, and she needed to be more. The problem wasn't that Trump was too right. It was more that Kamala was too left. And if she had just been a bit more centrist, she would have won. Whatever the fuck that means. Whatever that means. You just got to make that stuff up. That's why you have to kind of look at this stuff, look at these people's framings and the words that they use, and you can't just take stuff on. You got to ignore fucking 80% of it, frankly. Because as I say about the genuineness, a lot of these people are there, their whole thing, the reason they're there, the things they're saying aren't rooted in a genuine analysis of reality. They're there to bolster something. And so in the moment, there's a whole horde of people who went gung ho for candidate Harris, and their jobs in this moment is to salvage the decisions of the Kamala Harris campaign, Walt's campaign. And that's what their job is to look at the last several months and place any fault for the failure for this, what seems to be a landslide victory, place the fault elsewhere, particularly on voters, right? Voters didn't get it enough. You guys don't get how serious this is and how the stakes are. And Hillary Clinton was like, oh, these Palestine people, they don't understand the Middle East. They don't understand the Middle East. Like, they don't understand how many people Hillary and her husband killed and how how horrendous they've been, and the whole scope of what they've done, and the president since then, particularly in this region, and the machinations and how it led to our current condition and our current absurdity. And these are all stories. But what about the story that the Dems were uninspiring? What about the story that the Dems were uninspiring? That candidate Harris did not position herself as a meaningful and obvious alternative to the two pro-genocide candidates, to the two empire, to the other candidate, let's say, to Trump, the empire candidate. She could have done that. And it's so funny to watch dudes who, like, they respond to that going, well, no, she's still vice president, so she still has to, she's got to toe a difficult line between being her own individual self while also carrying water for the administration that she's vice president of. It's like, what? You're so quick to just adopt these narratives. You're so quick to adopt this perspective. Now you're in Kamala Harris's campaign shoes, and you're hedging bets between these political forces, and you think that you're so clever because you have this tortured perspective between doing the right thing and doing what is politically expedient, and that you've adopted this. And so that's not your job as the analyst, frankly, and you're not a candidate. You don't have to adopt the terms that the candidate is under. In fact, you mustn't adopt the candidate's political stuff. You're not getting paid the way the candidate was being paid. You're not running an absurd campaign and managing these things. You have to look at what is. You have to look at what is, and you need to be an advocate for what is and what is good and just and your values. It is not clever to be able to put on the shoes of the political candidates and begin speaking like them. I think that's one of the downstream effects of watching too much cable news. Cable news has oriented themselves deeply in the sort of embedded sort of politics, and they constantly give you the analysis from inside the campaign. Here's a campaign manager. Here's the candidate themselves. Here's the other candidate. Here's someone who's a strategist and blah, 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 Democrat strategist and a Republican strategist. And let's do this and let's hear how they think. And now you've become inundated with this way of thinking. And when we call it a way of thinking, it's like a philosophy. It's like a religion, especially daily 24/7 news cycle of this kind of regurgitated stuff where you're considering constituencies and trying to, and also considering the fundraising and all of this stuff. And cats at home would be doing the same thing. Be like, yeah, well, she's got, a lot of the donors are very, in favor of Israel at the moment, and you gotta It's like, what are you talking about? That's a story. You're adopting a particular story. I think I think if she had run a progressive campaign, which included a foreign policy that was rooted in humanism and international law, and opposed to carrying out and the funding of the genocide, um, that would have changed things in a major way. Would it have changed everything? No. I think that it's too easy to come up with a story. I think that all these stories are one facets of things, one facet of a more complex thing. But one of the biggest problems, I think, is these analysts, like I'm saying, not just people at home. I brought that up already. People at home are so succumbed to like the narratives given to them on the television screen that this is a problem. That now, as a voter, you're no longer thinking as a voter. You're thinking as a candidate, as a campaign manager, which is an entirely different kind of thinking, and it's actually harmful to you as a voter to be thinking that way. It's like being a student loan, and they'll do this here too. It's like being an adult with student loans, let's say, and you're thinking about the banks. You're thinking about, when it comes to like student loan debt forgiveness and all this stuff, you're thinking about the interests of banks, because you got to think about them, right? You got to, the banks are part of this thing, and you got to think about the student loan, the banks and the loan processors and all of these employees and people who, you can't. It's like you've lost it. You're no longer thinking. You've allowed a different story to overcome your experience. You've now taken on something that you need not take on, and that's what I see. But that's the story. Like, cats, if it's comfortable, if it feels sort of right, people will take it on. If you have a sense of yourself as like this entrepreneur or some libertarian person, and you think that you think you have a solid grasp of markets and this and that, you might end up arguing something from the perspective of the banks, because you've been watching CNBC and you've been watching Fox News, and they had the bank processor dude on there, and he was describing the challenges of this and that. Now you've adopted that language, and you think that you sound really intelligent, so you might start saying that. You might start telling a story. But one of the biggest problems for the Democrats is, I think that the analysts in those spaces are an older crop of like boomer analysts who are, and like a younger crop of people who are performing that older sort of template. And I don't think these people are looking at reality when candidate Harris has to think about what to do in the world. She's not starting as a humanist. She's not starting as an American with working class, like aiming to represent working class people, which is the majority of people in this country. She isn't, she's not grounded in anything. They're not grounded in anything. They're looking at polls. They're looking at poll data. They're looking at their donor thing, because that's what it is. It's like, get the vote out, polls and donors, get the money. And these are like boomer political strategies, and they're using dated categories. So one of the things I saw was someone had it showed what percentage of evangelicals, self-identified American evangelicals, Christian evangelicals, Trump won that handily. I think it was in the 80% or better. And this person is highly confused by this. What is he's a philanderer and a thief and a sexual and a womanizer and this and that. How can you? That whole stat, that whole poll, that whole category, that the language of looking through the lens of like, well, this group of people is evangelicals. This is some old 19th century, 18th century shit. The evangelicals, quote unquote, are not what you think they are. They might not even, they don't even refer to themselves in that way. And even if they refer to themselves in that way, what does that mean? What does it mean? How does it translate for their, their political engagement and their aims and what they see as red lines and this and that? A good number of Christians, conservative and liberal Christians, by voting for Kamala, by voting for candidate Harris, also went against the moral code for genocide. So if you think that it's absurd, you can't grasp how a Christian or an evangelical could vote for a quote unquote womanizer. You should also struggle for how an evangelical might vote for a candidate and a party and a political party that stands steadfast in their support for genocide. That should also trouble you, but it might not, because you're focused on a particular story. You're focused on the story that makes you like the friction, the tension between the good moral evangelical and Trump, but you don't want the story as it relates to candidate Harris. You don't want the story as it relates to candidate Harris, Biden, and immigration as well. As we saw at the end of her campaign, this move to the right, particularly on immigration, just conceding because Donald Trump and those guys and the poll numbers showed that some significant percentage of Americans are deeply concerned about immigration. And Fox News was successful in pushing the idea of like Haitians eating cats and of like, people from Mexico killing American citizens. So this is, you concede that and you start to speak to them and try to, you feed into that, you agree with that fear and then feed into it and became even further right than Trump. And let's not forget that during the Trump presidency, how many people were screaming, liberals screaming and crying about kids in cages, and they're so concerned about the border and silence is violence. And in fewer than 4 years, those same people have nothing to say about the same policies enacted by the president with a D in front of their name. That's not serious. We can't operate in that kind of unseriousness. It's a trick. It's a story about what we are capable of. It's a story about the bounds of what we're allowed to do that allows us to permit that and to continue to like give approval. It's like every 4 years is just this one. It's this release valve of this one political arena that has been built up and there's a whole commerce around it. Every 4 years we do this one thing, and in a losing effort, large swaths of the US liberal population who believe in human rights or who say that they do, they rubber stamp, you validated, you approved a political party that is engaged in what we've all agreed is the worst thing that humans can do to one another. And we didn't have to do that. You say that we have to do that. We didn't have to do that. Note that Trump won. And by the way, we can't, like, one of the stories that would like to emerge, the Democrats would like to emerge and would play on this big time. They did this to Ralph Nader so many years ago. They would love to be able to pin this on Jill Stein and Butch Ware and go, they're the ones, if it weren't for these people, then they can't do that. The numbers bear out that the margin of victory was so great in multiple key states that the Jill Stein votes were not instrumental. She was kind of, her campaign at the end of the day was fairly inconsequential to the results. But the people who voted for the Democrats have shown their willingness to contort themselves no matter what's going on, no matter how absurd. Let's remind ourselves that, and I'm the first to stand up against this kind of racist, sexist rhetoric that tries to paint, Vice President Harris as someone who kind of slept her way to the top, or that she didn't deserve this or that, or that she's dumber than her opponent, Trump, all this bullshit. I've been vocal in that way. And I'll continue to be that, because that's bullshit. But she was pulled into the candidate race late in the game by the Democrat Party undemocratically. She was pulled, they swapped the people out because the incumbent president was showing serious signs of decline. They swapped her out, and immediately the people who were gung-ho for Joe Biden managed to simply switch over to Kamala Harris and begin to support her unwaveringly, uncritically, without asking her to be a candidate that represents anything. That's not how it needs to be. It need not be that way. This is a reversal of the power relationship in a democratic society. But it's been made that way by the rhetoric creators, the storytellers. The storytellers told us that the thing that Kamala Harris needed at the moment was strong, unwavering support. The Republicans needed to see strong commitment to that party, and people showed up to do that. And you have to understand, if you're serious, you have to understand that, like, when you look at Donald Trump and you say, how come people don't see his decline, and how come people don't see that he's a strong man and he's a bad guy? How come people excuse this? They excuse his misogyny, and they excuse his violence, and they excuse his xenophobia and his fascist tendencies. Look at what you're excusing. Look at what you turn away from and you pretend not to see. Let's be clear that if candidate Harris had not been swapped in, if we were dealing with Joe Biden all the way through, a good many of these people would have still been doing the same things. We could have seen insane, like, Biden's been relatively absent. We haven't seen what's going on with him. Who's running the country at the moment? Who has any clue, right? A younger crop of terrible people who are running the country while Biden's incognito at the moment. But even if he was continuing the presidency, as poorly as that campaign was being run, those people would have been right there. They would have been telling you, they would have been calling you names for being critical of Biden, would have been demanding that you show a commitment to the party and that you undermine what you're seeing. Don't pay attention to these things and just be supportive. And we would have seen similar results. We would have seen a similar result here as well if it were Biden. So what's missing? What's the problem? Well, I think it's like I said, the party people are not attached to reality. They're not looking at reality. They're looking at not looking at the voting population and making political equations that relate to the needs of the people. They are looking at their polls. They're looking at old interpretations of old polls and old categories and old alliances, and that's what's happening at the top. And at the bottom, we've been trained, and we have to be mindful. There's a lot of people buy into this thing. They buy into the top celebrities. There's a whole infrastructure and a whole system of, like, corralling people back into the right position, which is to support what? To support a slogan? To support a color, blue? To support a political party? Is that the end goal, or is there something more? And so people always say, oh, well, when they get in, you have the opportunity to actually pressure them. Is that what happened during the Biden administration? I distinctly remember that once Biden won the 2020 election, a lot of people went to sleep. Biden reneged on some of the relief payments that were promised early on, or even at the end of the campaign. He reneged almost immediately as soon as he got in office, and a lot of people asked us to not pay attention. They asked us not to pay attention. So, and since then, it's been a steady. Of course, there's some complaints, there's some groaning, but people are not prepared to really challenge and put the Democrats to a test and hold them to task for things that they say and the things that they promise. Sheba says, Sheba, like literally all the politicians and philanderers, etc., were led, controlled by the worst generation. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Sheba says, and the Bible was real clear about how we're supposed to treat immigrants. Absolutely, it is. You know, the evangelicals, right? Well, what's that? Well, how can we? You're using words that aren't applicable. You're using categories that aren't. If you pull down these words, this is back to everything we've been talking about on this show for years now. The key is you have to let go of certain categories to then actually be able to see and actually give proper language and accurate language to what is. So the tension around why did evangelicals vote for Trump 80+%? There's no tension there. The assumptions that you're making about what it means to be an evangelical is wrong, especially an American evangelical. So any assumption you made and you thought that, okay, and at the end they had this, like, I think at the end, 3 days before the election, the November surprise was a video or an audio of Jeffrey Epstein, who claims, he's like, me and Trump were best friends. Everybody should be disgusted by Jeffrey Epstein and who he was and everything that he represents. So you think that was going to be a big thing? Like, oh, the evangelicals can't vote for the guy who was best friends with pedophile island guy, right? Well, yeah, of course they can. What does it mean to be an evangelical? What does it mean to claim or tick the box of, like, call yourself an evangelical? And how is that separate from, like, actually engaging in the views and values of Jesus Christ, which is what the word is supposed to imply? There's two different things. So 33 minutes. Wow. Let me finish real quick and just say, yo, I'm really interested in the storytelling of all this. This is all we're going to be now engaging in, weeks and weeks of storytelling, and everybody's going to be projecting their story on what happened and why. And they will tell the story about the Kamala Harris campaign, or about America at large, about the Republicans, about the voting population, about specific pockets of the voting population, and they'll be telling a narrow story. And it's important to know that if you're watching, like, cable news, for instance, you're watching professional storytellers whose goal it is to tell you a story that excludes the fault, the blame, the failures, the bad judgments of the political classes themselves. Not just Kamala Harris, the candidate, but also the people behind her. The people, the quote unquote, political experts and analysts. And I want to say that words are key. We have to speak more accurately. We have to pull down a lot of our old categorizations and words, and we have to become interested in what is in a new way, in a new and profoundly different way, with a more complex lens. The same confusion you have about evangelicals for Trump is the same confusion you might have about blacks for Trump. You're like, well, why would blacks? Again, you have a set of assumptions about some blacks and what black means. And of course, we know that blackness has a number of definitions. It's not just skin color. Some people, when they talk about blackness, they're talking about a counterweight, a political counterweight to, free market ideology and whiteness and white superiority and all of these other things. It's a working class, a social counterweight that is political. But these are words. These are words. And it all ties back in. I wrote a piece about the NABJ. The NABJ hosted a meeting with Donald Trump several months before the election. They tried to have Harris as well, but they couldn't. So it was just with Donald Trump and three journalists, or three members of the NABJ were on stage. One was from ABC News, one was from Semaphore, and one was from Fox News. And it's the same confusion here. Like, Harris Faulkner was the person from Fox News who was with Trump. These labels you have, these labels. So NABJ is the National Association of Black Journalists. Who is a journalist? What are we talking about? If we define journalists properly, we realize that Harris Faulkner should not have been on that stage. All of these definitions are causing us problems because the assumptions laden in them produce actions, and like properly delineating what a journalist is puts us in a position to improve our entire discourse. And so Harris Faulkner, as a Fox News personality, wouldn't be on that stage. She wouldn't be asking fawning questions of Donald Trump in that moment. We'd be having an entirely different set of conversations up and down the thing about what's going on in this moment. But old definitions can do us in. You ever talk to somebody like an old Cold War person? And you see that the Russians, we gotta watch for the Russians. Blah, blah, blah. Everything's, the communists are coming, be careful. It's like, this nigga's still in the Cold War. He got old definitions. They can't see what's going on in the moment. So I actually think that the voting population has evolved greatly. Our definitions has gone up. We have a stronger connection to reality, obviously. And I think that in the last several years, I think just, awareness of the complexity has skyrocketed. But the political establishment is still dealing with very rigid, old, get out the vote techniques and words and framings of the black people and the white suburban moms and the evangelicals and all this old fucking 19th century, 18th century shit. And so they'll continue to lose. They'll continue to be entirely disoriented and detached from their, what should be their political base. But again, I think it's all fuzzy because in truth, and again, if you're attached to the Democrats, you think the Democrats are some old, like, working class Labor Party thing. You're also not paying attention. You're also trapped in some older construction of what the Democrats was. The Democrats are now, they've courted the same money that the Republicans are. They've outsourced their strategies to the same, private political operatives, where these guys are doing the same shit, like I said, and it's all trash. And so we need to be clear about that. And actually, in the next 4 years, our goal is to continue to kind of better understand each other and speak better to each other and see each other better, and to be able to see each other over these little fences that they've created that try to carve us out in different spaces, because that's not what is. And that's my time. That's the episode. Applause for that. And like, I'm not gonna be doing too much of this political analysis stuff, but I wanted to get this in, and maybe we'll do a little bit more of that somewhere down the line. But thanks very much. Hold up, Jack says, "What up, Jack? I'm gonna just try and organize locally. As a communist, I really am trying to come. No Diddy." You really trying to come, Jack? Yeah, man. I'll tell you, the organizing locally is a key part of this. And again, words escape what is. So we need to organize locally and communicate. And we have our work cut out for us, real talk. I don't have any easy answers, but I do think part of it is that everyone, it's like this slow elevation of everyone from the generation before. That's one of the best things we can do, is to actually elevate from the previous generation rather than lower ourselves into lower vibration, into cheap labels and categories, going right back to this political bullshit. That's the episode, yo. Applause. I'll see you tomorrow. It's 30 for 30 episodes in 30 days. Tomorrow will be episode 108. It'll be day 25. Holy shit, we're almost at the end of this. But thanks again. Good luck. Don't get too stressed about all this shit, man. It is the same country today than it was yesterday. You really are seeing what you're looking for. Remember that. And it's all one thing, okay? All right. Love. Peace.
Last things first, you already win. You already him. You don't gotta pretend. Fuck them. You already king. You stay real. You confident in your skin. It's all now. Sit in the power that you already in. This the story of a master from a true Bedouin, far away from home than few ever been. First round pick, league of the smooth gentleman. The game rigged like 50 said it's a cruel sentiment. I'm from the era when lyrics and bars is over everything. 5-star veteran. You couldn't walk in my fucking shoes or carry them. Excuse my borderline is very thin. Been married to the game like ever since maybe 2010. I realized most of y'all not serious. Point blank period. I flex and twist necks like cherry stems. Thought he was buried, but there he is, a new narrative. I keep winning.
They not used to what you bringing, kid.
I keep winning.
They don't even know what they looking at.
I keep winning.
Man, yo, pick one lane and stay in that
I
shit.
keep winning.
You came up on that hood shit.
I
my
keep
nigga,
winning.
You know, nobody seeing your vision.